Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Stellantis Tech and AI podcast. I'm Dale Jewett, your host. And today, we're going to ride along on one of the hottest topics in the automotive industry, autonomous driving. And joining me for this chat is Doug Wellman, who is the head of autonomous driving at Stellantis. Doug, thanks a lot for taking some time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me, Dale. I'm excited to be here today.
So autonomous driving has really been a big topic in the industry for many years now, 5, 6, probably even more. And there's lots of discussion around what technologies are right, what the technology can do, what a customers want. And I think we're going to touch on a bunch of all of that. But let's start by, how did you get interested in autonomous driving technology, and what drives you to want to work on this part of the business?
Yeah, so my first introduction to it was back in 2008 when I was brought on board to develop the first radar adaptive cruise control solution. At the time, I made fun of, made kind of a joke to my team saying that I didn't even know how to spell ACC. So I really didn't understand the benefit as that started. But as I seen how powerful these solutions can become, once you start now adding additional sensing and what features you can offer to the customer. Of course, we started from a traditional adaptive cruise control. Then we brought in cameras to include new features such as lane keep assist. Then you start even building even additional features. Now you're combining radars and cameras to provide a lane centering feature along with adaptive cruise control. Then you just keep building up higher, where now we offered a hands-off, eyes-on solution for L2 Plus. And then, as we just announced, we now are offering a hands-off, eyes-off in some situations solution. So you can see the power of these features and what the technology can do and the benefits that a customer can use it for.
Excellent. Well, that's intriguing stuff, Doug. And before we go much further, because this is a technology thing, there's a lot of jargon and some acronyms that I know are going to crop up. So I want to start by, just saying, when you hear these things, here's what we're talking about. And one of the first ones you hear is ADAS. That's a pretty common term. It stands for Automated Driver Assistance Systems, if I've got that correct.
Yep.
All right. Yep. And then you talked about spelling ACC, which is Adaptive Cruise Control. So we're a long way from cruise control that was introduced back in the 70s when I was learning to drive, where you pretty much picked a speed and asked the car to just maintain that speed. Adaptive cruise control brings in some intelligence so the vehicle has a sense of, is there an obstruction or a vehicle ahead of you, and it will maintain distance automatically without you intervening, if I've got that correct.
That's correct.
All right. And then there's also always this talk about levels, which goes to the shorthand of L1, L2, L3. And that's a reference to a guideline published by the SAE International, the global engineering group. And it's sort of ranking, the capabilities of these various ADAS systems. So, already we've made reference to things like L2, L2 plus, and L3. And I think basically L2 is, there's the driver assistance, but the driver has to hold onto the wheel and has to pay attention to the road. And then we have L2 plus, which a number of automakers offer today. And these are a combination of systems where the driver, for select periods of time, could take his hands off the wheel, but has to still continue to pay attention to the road. And then we get L3, which we'll talk a bit more about, and that's what you referenced as the hands-off, hands-free, eyes-off functionality of the systems. Hopefully I've gotten all that correct.
Yeah, and again, it's important that each OEM has maybe their own definitions of how they define these levels, even though it is an SAE specific standard. But there's some gray areas where some features can react a little differently between OEMs. So it's important that the customer truly understands how these features work for the given vehicle that they're driving, to make sure that they understand what the vehicle can and cannot do. And all this information is, of course, available to them in their owner's manual.
Okay, excellent. So Stellantis recently came out with the announcement that we have the technology capable to deliver level 3 or L3 capabilities. We call it STLA AutoDrive. Can you just give me a quick rundown of what STLA AutoDrive is?
Yeah, so in this case, it's L3 for this particular case STLA AutoDrive is our autonomous driving platform. It's not just L3. So L3 is included within the platform. So STLA AutoDrive is our entire, is what provides all the feature content from autonomous vehicle standpoint to the customer. So it contains all your basic level features, as we talked about earlier. So for automatic emergency braking, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, lane centering. It also it contains, like we talked about, the hands off, eyes on feature that we call L2 Plus, and then also what you're just talking about here, which in some situations we will offer hands off, eyes off, as we talked about it in our public release.
Okay. And a couple of highlights from that release. We're using a suite of sensors so that the vehicle has a good idea of what's going on around it. And as the system is configured now, we're limiting the speed that it'll operate at, which is more of a low to moderate speed, as opposed to someone who might think, oh, I'm just going to drive across Nebraska without putting my hands on the steering wheel.
Yeah. So in this case where this feature is available, again, because we're offering it as a hands off, eyes off, we limit the usability to that in areas where we can absolutely confirm its reliability and robustness to perform exactly as we'd speak. Of course, we're working on increasing that usability for that particular feature, but while we're doing that, we are offering additional features that will provide in higher speeds, like I said before, the hands-off, eyes-on feature with L2 Plus, and then in areas where that's not available, we also offer lane centering. So the customer is going to have many different options for driver assistance that they'll be able to use, and we're very excited to provide that to them.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you and your team have been working for years to perfect this. And as I sit here and think about, do I want to use this technology? I think one of your most challenging perception would be, how do I trust the system? As a driver, I trust myself and my reactions, but how can you convince me that it's okay to hand that over to the vehicle?
And the trust is a two-way street. In fact, if you think about it, when you first started driving a car, I think there were some areas where you had some nervousness or anxiety while you were beginning to learn how the car works and how you're driving in these complex environments, right? As a brand new driver versus how you're driving today, where it's an afterthought for the most part. It's the same thing here. As you start to use these features, you learn what they can and they cannot do. And the expectation is that these features work when they're supposed to, and when they're not supposed to, that we effectively communicate that to the driver that the feature is not available. So having that communication is important. But again, as you build that trust, as you grow in levels of autonomy, it takes a little longer to build that trust, because now you're subjecting yourself to more and more situations that could occur. So it's just something, again, it builds over time, similar like it was when you first started learn how to drive. And eventually you'll really start to appreciate, once you learn what these features can do, you'll start to appreciate what they can offer for you.
I'm sitting here chuckling a bit because this discussion about trust reminds me that the level of trust when I learned to start to drive in driver's education was the fact that the gym teacher who was sitting in the seat next to me had his own little brake pedal on the side. So if he lost trust in me, he had his own level of trust in case it was needed. So
exactly. Yeah. So we replaced your gym teacher with the vehicle doing it on its own.
Yeah.
In this case.
So here's another important question in my mind as someone who enjoys driving. If I hand over the driving tasks to the vehicle, what am I supposed to do with my hands?
Yeah, in this case, it's the best answer is anything you want or nothing. I mean, the goal is for you, the car is now doing the tasks that you normally have to do. So what I usually do when I'm driving hands off is I'm just again monitoring the environment and able to increase my senses about other things that are going on out in the road. So in this case, as you're driving, you're able to see or look at things, and you're not focusing. It's just a lot less mental load that you're putting on yourself to do something else, right? As you take on more of those tasks, in these features, the driver is able to use their senses and use their, basically take that time back for themselves to reduce reduce the overall stress of the day or stress that they're having.
Mm-hmm. I think in the beginning of the push for autonomous driving technology a number of years ago, people initially viewed, or some people touted, that the development of this technology was a safety factor, that somehow if we could make all the vehicles smart, that we could reduce the number of crashes. Do we see this as a safety factor, or is this technology more like what I consider cruise control, which is more of a convenience option?
Yeah, these are still, to be clear, these are still driver assistance convenience features. These are not safety features. It's important the driver understands that they still own the responsibility of the control of the vehicle. So we don't want to mislead them by saying that there's something that they're not. So this is why we want to provide additional assistance to the driver, but we should not call them safety features because they are not developed that way. Of course,
Okay.
the features are safe, but we
Hmm.
would not consider them as safety features.
I see. We've we, Stellantis, and the industry as a whole have been working on autonomous driving technology for a number of years, and at various levels of success, and certainly various modes of operation. Some companies have tried the robo-taxi approach versus putting in individual vehicles. What are the challenges in trying to develop these types of systems? I would guess the first thing is, how do I get a computer to replicate all the knowledge that's in my brain, my personal brain, from all the years that I've been driving?
Yeah, as we talked about, as you grow in the levels of autonomy, it takes a lot more sensing and a lot more information in order to make those predictions, in order to take over some of the tasks that the driver has to take over. So in this case, when you start to grow, you add additional, of course, compute into the vehicle, you add additional sensing into the vehicle, you utilize, information coming from the cloud. All these things are then just continually adding into build up the scene and the environment in order to make sure that the features and the system is working as you would expect it to, as if you were driving the vehicle.
What does the vehicle need to know to be able to adequately handle this task of driving?
Yeah, so in this case, of course, we use multiple different sensors. We use the combination of radars, cameras, ultrasonics. All these things are done off-board cloud information, such as map information, GPS coordinates, everything that we need to know in order to build the scene or the environment. So that way, once we have that detailed information and once we sense everything around the vehicle, we're able to predict what we want to do or what the vehicle can do within these features.
How much of a challenge is it to take all that sensing capability and integrate it into vehicles? Pictures that I've seen of development vehicles, they usually have a giant array up on the roof rack, right?
Yeah,
They're looking very Lunar Rover-ish.
yeah, of
I'm sure
course.
people don't want that in their cars on the road.
No, and of course that, what you've seen there is what a lot of OEMs, including us, is using for us to take data and build data sets so we can then have the high accuracy data that we need to continue development of these features. But for as you stated, because of the complexity of these sensors, we went from, for example, maybe 4 ultrasonic sensors and a radar. Now you have multiple radars, multiple cameras, multiple ultrasonics, multiple, other sensing that you're getting, including cloud-based sensing or cloud-based information. All of this is tied together infused into making this feature work. And you can imagine the complexity of taking all that information and making it work and creating a scene to be able to perform the tasks of these features.
Hmm. Is there a lot of redundancy amongst the sensing technologies, or does each sensor have its own specific mission?
No, there's redundancy. Redundancy is important, of course, because you shouldn't, just basically look for a single point of information. So we utilize that's the reason why we utilize multiple radars and cameras in order to perform that level of redundancy. We're able to pick that information up. It's important to have that in order to ensure that you're not falsely detecting something on a single point failure. So that's the reason why redundancy is important in these features.
Okay. Uh, what about use cases? The day that we're having this chat happens to be a nice sunny day, which the hope of spring. But can you use it in a cloudy day? Can you use it if it's raining? Can you use it at night?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we have an open sky, and we do require connectivity, so you need to be connected in order for some of these higher level of autonomy features to work. So as long as you have that, and as long as the sensing does not detect, any conditions where it's not able to operate within the window of where it needs to be able to provide these features or functions, the feature is available. So we have the ability to detect when it's not. And the important thing is whenever these conditions, which can change rather quickly, the sensing, once we understand that it's not available, we're able to effectively communicate back to the driver that they need to take back over.
So Doug, I'm a fan of technology in vehicles, and I've been fortunate to grow with them over the last couple 3 decades. Everything from basic cruise control to stability control, and I find this technology very intriguing. But I'll be honest, I'm a person who enjoys driving and enjoys the task of driving. I'm not likely, or I'm finding personally, not sure when I would actually want to engage a system like this.
Yeah. So, and again, you're one of the people that I'd like to show some of the benefit. And maybe there's certain situations, and again, it was like I didn't really understand the technology before getting involved into it. But as you start to drive it, and as you start to see what it can do and what it can't do, what it's able to do, the goal would be is to, to get to such a natural point that you would enjoy using it. And I'd like to find a way to, like, that's the area where I'd like to find the skeptics or people that are still wondering why they want the car to do these things. We need to show them the benefits, and we can do that by showing them a system that works reliably, and a system that's very predictable, which it should be, and also shows them the benefits of what they can do, as we grow the levels of autonomy, what they can do when the feature is active. So there's areas where I think I understand there are people that are still a little bit skeptical about letting the people drive the car for them. But then there's also areas when you're on a long road trip, you're on a long stretch of highway, it's not that exciting, and you want to kind of just take your hands off the wheel and let the car take you there. It's very convenient.
Okay. Is that the kind of feedback we're getting from customers as we've been developing the system? I mean, I'm kind of curious. We've announced the technology, others have announced the technology, but the rollout seems to be rather conservative.
Yeah, and again, as you grow, that's why you have to be careful and make sure that you introduce features when the market conditions are right, making sure that everything that you're giving to the customer they're ready for, and making sure that it makes sense. But at the same time, getting more and more people to drive these features, drive what's on the road today, learning from them, taking the data from them, will help us build better features in the future. So, and that is our goal.
Okay. So this obviously is a part of our technical universe that's rapidly changing and evolving and offers a lot of challenges, as you and I have been talking about. So if I'm an engineering student, someone who's really interested in this type of technology, how do I get involved? What would you give me as your quick advice about how to make my way into this part of our business?
So as you said earlier, first you should want to love it. Now, again, I was maybe one of the people that didn't understand it when I first started getting involved. So I grew to love it very quickly. But it really does help if you now, especially with it become more and more predominant today. I think it's easier. People know a little bit more than what I knew back when I first started. So they should be able to come in and really want to work on this environment where the goal again is to making the driving task for our customers much easier. And the higher levels of autonomy that we're able to achieve, the better that is for our customers and drivers. It also will enable some in the future, hopefully something someday for people that aren't able to drive because of certain reasons, they would be able to drive. So I can tell you personally, I have a disabled daughter who struggles to drive a little bit. I'm
Hmm.
fully confident now with these features and what's coming forward that this is an opportunity that she'll be able to do eventually, when we get the right level of autonomy and what right support for her. So you should want to love it. That's again, and then secondly, be curious about how to make it better. So looking at, what else can we do? Just understanding the power of what we're putting in the cars, and what else can we do in with this information and what this data. Yeah, and then just be adaptable because it's fast.
Hmm.
Very, the environment today is moving at a rapid pace, faster than I've ever seen in my career. So just be adaptable to change and be receptive of change because it's coming. So those couple things, I think it's something, if you're interested and you're adaptable, it's a very good space to be in.
Okay. Doug, this has been a really interesting conversation. I find the concept of self-driving vehicles very intriguing. I think I think if you could engineer Dale mode so that if I turned the control over to the car, or the task of driving over to the car, that it understands me and mimics me a little bit, that'd probably help me feel a little bit better. Especially if it knows which music I'd like to be listening to. But I appreciate that you have taken a bunch of time to talk to us about this, and the work that you've done. I'm now intrigued. I've never been inside a fully autonomous vehicle. I would like to give that a try sometime, although I never feel that great as a passenger. I really do enjoy having the control, so I think it might be a walk for me to reach the point where I would say, Doug, this is great.
Well, I mean, again, I'd like to offer you to come sit with me in a car, and then I can take you and I can explain, or at least have you experience some of these things to really understand the benefits that could be there. And I think after a little bit of time with me and more use of the features, I think you'll become a believer. I can tell you that the development of this has been a team effort from the Stellantis standpoint. The entire team around the globe has worked tirelessly to develop this platform and to start building it and start launching it. So we're all very excited about how fast this is growing, and we're looking forward to the future.
That brings the global thing brings up one last question, and I appreciate you entertaining it. So I'm sure our colleagues in Europe don't really drive the same way we do here in America or around the world. Does this system take that into account? Does it know that, hey, I'm in Europe, I have different driving styles to accommodate?
Yeah, I mean, we have to take data around the world, and because of those specific, and we talked about it earlier, the environment is very important to the success of these features. So in Europe, you have different infrastructure, you have different road signs, you have different driving styles, you have different laws. All these things take into account, how the development of these features work. So yes, we definitely, based on the region, based on where we will apply these features to, or where we'll launch these features at, for sure the region will have a big impact on that, and we'll have to make sure that they work as expected.
Excellent. Okay, one of these days, I think I'll get together with you, and maybe we'll drive across Nebraska and see how things go.
That sounds great.
Doug, this has been a great conversation, and I thank you very, very much for your time.
Yeah,
and I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in to the Stellantis Tech and AI podcast, where we speak with some of the brightest minds in the tech and automotive industries, like Doug here. We invite you to follow Stellantis Tech and AI on LinkedIn and Instagram to join the conversation, stay updated on what's ahead, and be a part of the community exploring the fast line of tech and AI in the auto world. We'll see you again soon.